Hi, a very good afternoon and a good morning to whichever part of the world you're joining us from. We're very happy to have you with us at this 2021 virtual pavilion of the Government of India, set up by the Ministry of Information Broadcasting with the help and support of FICCI. We have a very exciting discussion today, especially in the times of new normal, when the entire value chain of the film industry is changing and going through a dynamic process. Creation and co-creation are two activities that have always been spoken about, especially in film markets and film festivals. Internationally, as per the industry parlance, they're referred as international co-productions. But very interesting, is that the government has a strategic intervention as an institutional funder or as an institutional development agency to support co-productions both from a supply side and a demand side. I specify this because our panelists, our eminent panelists, are going to be talking about it from both perspectives. Very quickly, supply side, and this is my interpretation, is institutional funding. So we have the BFI represented here, we have the NFDC represented here, and there are agencies like Udimages from Europe, Screen Australia, etc. International treaties on co-production, and we'll be talking about that. From the demand side, there's market access, which is primarily the Script Lab, the NFDC Screenwriters Lab, Torino Film Lab, etc., etc. Co-production markets, NFDC Film Bazaar, which is South Asia's biggest market, and of course, incentives. To put this in perspective, I have a very eminent panel with me, and I would like to welcome them to this discussion. Preet Kaur, who is the Director of Films in the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting and the MD NFDC. Mr. Pan Nalin, who is a very acclaimed filmmaker. His last film, his recent film, The Last Film Show, premiered at the 20th Tribeca Film Festival, and he'll talk about that more. He's an award-winning filmmaker who's done films like Samsara, Valley of Flowers, Angry Indian Goddesses, and so many more. NFDC's had the opportunity to co-produce with him, and we'll talk about that too. Mr. Simon Perry, a very renowned figure in the production circles and in the film industry in Europe, a senior consultant of the Best Practice Exchange with a lot of knowledge on co-productions, institutional funding, and of course, the industry and the way it's being structured now. Who is a producer and founder of the Magidor Film Germany and a good friend of India, having produced co-produced two Indian films. A very colorful slate that he has, and has walked all the red carpets in the world. So we're going to talk to him about co-productions and collaborations. We're waiting to be joined in by Mr. Neil Peplow of the BFI. More on him when he comes in. Ma'am, it's my privilege to start with you first. There's some really groundbreaking effort under your stewardship. Primarily, I talk about the Film Bazaar Alliance with the Cannes Film Market in presenting 7 projects at the Co-Production Market 2021. And this is at the Co-Production Day. Ma'am, please give us a perspective on how this is going to be promoting Indian cinema and your efforts.
Good afternoon, everyone. NFDC has a very close and very active coordination and cooperation with the Cannes Film Market. Last year, 2020, in the pandemic time, when Cannes was all virtual, NFDC had at that time collaborated with the Cannes as Goes to Cannes program. This year, in the co-production day, we have collaborated with Cannes on 7 co-production projects. So we are very hopeful that these co-production projects, which are the best ones from our Film Bazaar done last year and this year, early this year, so it will open up new opportunities for co-productions. We are looking forward to people, international producers, storytellers to come to India to take our content outside, to take the beauty of our country abroad, and also to have an Indian narrative, to have an Indian story to be told in different parts of the world. This year's collaboration with Cannes, in where we are giving our 7 projects, so we are really looking forward to an active cooperation and coordination in the coming years as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Keeping that strain of thought in mind, where an institutional funder and a producer like NFDC is trying to project and trying to position Indian language productions across the world through such tie-ins, who better to push this envelope further than Mr. Simon Perry. Simon, you've had a checkered past with the various film commissions, film institutional bodies that you've headed. You've also been a producer. But I'm going to come to you with the pandemic because we're sitting in the new normal. How is the industry structuring itself to address co-creation, collaboration, and how are institutional funders responding to the need of the hour, especially in this pandemic times?
Thanks, Vic, for that question. I think I want to say that co-production, international co-production, has changed a great deal over the last 20, 25 years, to a point where now co-production and co-production funding is much more tied to the physical work that a film can do in a country or in a region, in a city, than it used to be. In other words, if you're putting a co-production together now, you need to be able to take modules or parts of the production to other countries in order to raise money in those other countries. So a film being co-produced nowadays probably needs to be shot in more than one country. Very likely the post-production will be done in yet another country. And, you know, the money will be put together from different funds in those different countries, which are economically driven, they're economically based funds. So money is available nowadays, much more than it used to be, from institutions and organizations where the money will be spent, because those organizations receive money from governments, and political organizations and political structures based on the economic activity that they can generate in the country, in the region, in the city where they are based. And I'm remembering that 25 years ago, Pan and I worked together because he was producing a film called Dance of the Wind, which was made by Rajan Koza. And this was a multi-country co-production, many European countries involved, including Britain. I also helped to finance, to co-produce and finance Asif Kapadia's film, The Warrior, which is also an international co-production. And then Gurinder Chadha's film, Bandit Like Beckham, which, okay, it was an entirely European story made by Kenyan Indian woman, but you know, it was a co-production. It was actually a co-production with Germany. These films were made using money that was much less territorialized. The money was raised on the basis that organizations in different countries perhaps had some cultural link, maybe, to the subject matter, but maybe not. Maybe simply that they felt that the film was of high quality. The filmmaker was somebody that an institution like mine wanted to support, even if it was a filmmaker from another country. That the film could have a market in the country where I was operating a fund, for example. Those are the kind of considerations. Now, you'll all know that there's been a very big rise in the last 20 years of what we call cash rebates or production incentives, which are entirely territorially based. And this is money which is available to filmmakers, to producers who take a production to another country, shoot it there or do work there, and they get part of the cost of or part of the expenditure that they incur in those countries is rebated by the government. So that money is completely tied to economic activity which the film production brings to a particular place. And there are many regional funds now in large countries, not national funds, but regional funds, which are based in particular areas of the countries where the politicians are interested in stimulating perhaps a city or an area where there used to be industrial activity and it's no longer functioning. And now they look to the film industry, which is a very big employer, it's very labor intensive, to come and make films in that particular place, employ a lot of people, help to build a local audiovisual infrastructure. These are economic motivations on the part of the funding and the funding provided by politicians. So it's all now based, or almost all based, on what work a film can bring to a particular place, and that will trigger the funding. Now, that's a very big difference from 20, 25 years ago. And what it means now is that if you're going to make an international co-production, you are certainly going to have to do a lot of traveling. And you're going to be going to several different production bases in different countries, incurring expenditure there and getting funding to be there. That's something that was, of course, became very difficult in the time of the pandemic, because traveling, crossing international borders, mingling with people from other countries, working together in different places, different bases over time, that was in many cases just simply impossible. And so as a matter of fact, a lot of co-productions simply couldn't happen, because the way the funding works now, that funding just couldn't be available. Looking to the future, and I don't want to talk too much about this, but we can get back to the subject perhaps. You know, there's a lot of interest among funding organizations around the world in making that money less tied purely to physical economic activity, to going back to the way that funding organizations mostly used to work in the past, where the quality of the film, the likely distribution potential of the film, the possibility of the performance of the film in one's own market. These are the drivers of the funders that are looking at being involved in an international co-production that comes from another country. But we can perhaps talk more about that in the future. The pandemic wiped out international co-production for really quite some time because of the extremely territorialized nature of funding nowadays.
Thanks, Simon. Simon left off at a very interesting point when he talked about the pandemic having wiped out. And that's when UPAN knocked at the film facilitation office and said, guys, I'm making this film called The Last Film Show in Gujarat. And while we worked on the permissions, and then suddenly you come back and say, I'm scaling it up. And it went from a local language production to an international official Indo-French collaboration. While that was facilitated by the Ministry of I&B, I want to know from you that how did you scale up suddenly? What made you, as a filmmaker, as a director, you had a certain vision. That vision was very Indian. And then you took that vision and you had an interested party from France who suddenly says, hey, I align with that vision. For a filmmaker, the alignment of vision, there's a cultural vision, there's a production vision, a distribution vision. How does this vision come together?
Yes, I think in case of Last Film Show, when I started, as you're aware, I started as a very local film set in Gujarat, which is very remote. My mother tongue, Gujarati language, that too even Kathiawadi dialect. And I realized that what I was trying to do is also partly autobiographical. And I was not sure whether it has any universal quality or, you know, it's very good to say in theory that what is local can be global and all that. But when it comes to story, it's very, you know, it's a different scenario. So we started working on project mounting, you know, applied for permissions and preparing, and we found the locations and we did the casting. And in the process, you know, in 2019, we were in Cannes, you know, and trying to pitch, you know, that we are shooting this film, you know, like literally 4 months from now. So which made most of the co-production not possible because the countries like Germany and France need about a year to apply to funds like CNC and, you know, the Indo-German funds. And then you have to count the point that you have to be 20 point if there has to be French technicians. And for us, there were two problems that if we don't shoot now, we might not have those amazing cinema hall. Even the railway station we were filming would be gone. The cinema hall was going to be destroyed and turned into a mall. So we realized that if we have to make a set, it will cost us $1 million more. So we decided to go ahead. But by then, you know, we had the pitch deck, you know, we had photographs, we had location beside the screenplay. We had a lot more elements. And it just appealed to, you know, many distributors. So first thing I did was I spoke with at least 5 or 6 distributors who had acquired my earlier movie, Faith Connection and Angry Indian Goddesses, from Spain and from Japan. And I said, look, I'm making this film. Don't buy it, but can you tell me if such a story comes from India, set in a Gujarat, there are this naughty gang of kids, you know, who are trying to make their own movie show. And what do you think? And look at the cast, look at the photographs. And he said, whatever you are pitching, even if it's half good, we will buy it. So that gave us a confidence to raise equity money, and not go for public fund. We said, okay, can we find an equity partner who can become a co-producer? Then the talk went to UGC, which is the French company, distribution company. And they really liked the project and they set up a meeting with Orange Studio as a sales company. So, and they said, okay, this is good. We will give you a very good MG, you know, which we have never given minimum guarantee on an Indian movie like that, but we will risk it as far as you can make it official French co-production. So we said, now, how do we crack that? You know, because this is when we came to you also that, okay, this suddenly the film can have a greater future, you know, this can travel wide. So we spoke to the French production company with whom I had already done documentary on Kumbh Mela. Faith Connection. We had taken to Toronto, and it was distributed in theater in about 20 countries. So they decided, they said, look, why don't we do post-production in Paris, but we said our post-production costs in India were much cheaper, and how do we balance that out to, the French salaries? So there was all that thing was happening, but I realized that at least the people whom I was talking to were culturally aligned, and I had my creative freedom to do what I wanted to do, because I was the first one who was investing money. I sold my apartment in Mumbai. I got Dheer Momaya, another young producer from Mumbai, who came on board. And as we were putting our money, we found another investor who said, okay, these guys, they have their skin in the game. So he came with €500,000 from Hungary, from Budapest, and he, in a way, I think it was just collective appeal to the story that as far as we don't go over €1.5 million type of budget, we thought we could recoup in minimum guarantees, and the world sales with company like Orange Studio selling the film. So it was a calculated risk how we put together. And then we applied for, CNC and with you to make it as an official co-production. And we also realized, because Gujarat Tourism told us that the places you are films have been shot there. So this looks spectacular, and this is quite amazing. We have seen Rajasthan, Kerala, Assam, but rarely we have seen Kathiawad, or Saurashtra in Gujarat. So there again was a new discovery for the landscape of the people that, many people wouldn't believe that there could be some of the people from Gujarat are African looking, because they've been there since 5 centuries. So I think ultimately the story sort of won, because people started seeing little bit like Cinema Paradiso Indian, that's what the distributors say. Oh, this could go like Cinema Paradiso Indian, Indian movie. So that was one of the first reaction. Second, because it's a film about film, and it's about a small town where a cinema hall is going to shut down in 2010, where celluloid is going to disappear and digital will be replaced. Now, this story was lived across the world by everyone. We all grew up with celluloid, like Dance of the Wind, with Simon, what we did was shot on celluloid. It was an FDC co-production, and I shot my movies on celluloid. So suddenly the story of how India had contributed unknowingly in an ecological way, recycling all the old projectors. There were giant iron projectors which were melted and turned into spoon and katoris, the bowls, in the factories. We had several 100,000 projector, and the film prints, which were literally thousands and thousands, millions of kilometers of films, were melted and turned into bangles for women. So now suddenly there was this whole universe and metaphor of women wearing bangle, and I used to think as a kid, okay, he or she might be wearing Manmohan Desai or Amitabh Bachchan on she doesn't know that maybe there is a Jean-Luc Godard somewhere, or, so suddenly our pitch became quite interesting about this particular time where celluloid went away. And then Film Heritage Foundation from Mumbai got interested, and so our co-production suddenly became reality. And I think then, thanks to your office supporting us and giving us all the necessary document, we were able to validate that co-production, because that encouraged European distributor to buy the movie if we can get official French co-production, because I believe they could get subsidy when they release the movie, or they are qualified for some kind of benefits if the film qualifies as French.
Right.
So it became kind of a win-win situation for me. Right. Yeah. That's how the India-France co-production came together with Orange Studio and Virginie Films. Yeah.
Wonderful. Coming out of our conversation, of course, is the story and collective appeal, which I'm going to come to Chris with. But I want to leave you with the thought, Pan, that when you release the film in India, we will help you speak with the Gujarat Tourism, which is the nodal agency, and maybe you can do an integrated campaign where, you know, Gujarat promotes your film and your film promotes the locations where you shot, I think, and I'd be very happy, the FFO would be very happy to facilitate that conversation. Pan, we've
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much.
Most welcome. I want to welcome in our midst Mr. Neil Peplow, who is the Director of Industry and International Affairs at the BFI, and of course, a much wanted man now with heading the UK Global Screen Fund, which is a £7 million fund and in everybody's wanted list. But Neil, I'm going to come to you a little shortly. A very interesting conversation that we were having about co-creation, collaboration, both at an institutional funding as well as private, and how do you know, bring this collective appeal between different partners who might come from different countries. Christophe, I want to go to you. You've been involved in a Vietnamese film. Then you've done a Kyrgyzstani film. You've then, you know, worked on, in your earlier day before Magador, you worked on What Women Want with Mel Gibson, which was also a co-production. And you've done an Icelandic-German co-production. And now you've done 2 Indian films. So carrying this idea of story and a collective appeal when it comes to co-production, give us a lowdown on how this collective appeal translates to a funding plan or a finance plan. A soft loan, institutional funding, how does one structure this finance plan? A lot of our listeners would, I'm sure, and the viewers would be wanting to know that how do you mix it up? How do you create this finance plan that appeals to not only the producers, but also appeals to those who are funding?
I fear I have to make a little detour. I mean, first of all, I want to say to Dan Pret that the idea of doing co-production markets where people meet is really something that I like very much. And that's why I came to India, because of Film Bazaar. And at Film Bazaar, I met these projects, either curated projects or just people that I met by incidents. And you know, I mean, it's resonating already here quite massively. I mean, listening to Simon, he says that production gets more and more territorial. And what I would like to contribute here, and then I will answer your question to finance plan also, is that what starts me always is at the beginning, it's the contact and the people. And if there is no contact and the meeting with people, I cannot connect. And then comes the story. And if this story really interests me, then I'm the romantic guy. What does that mean? Romantic means that I really don't care about all these obstacles that are in front of me, and there are always obstacles. My whole life is full of obstacles. I mean, the first film I did was Little Senegal. It was an Algerian, French, German co-production shot completely in New York, and it premiered in New York. Crazy. And my last big one where I was attached to is, you may have heard of that title, is There Is No Evil. And I mean, There Is No Evil is from Iran. And the whole shooting was illegal and underground. So it is completely impossible to do territorial shooting of an Iranian underground film in North Rhine-Westphalia or London or wherever. So, I mean, it is not all these questions that drive me. And I can tell you it gets even worse because I'm also an expert at Creative Europe. I'm analyzing applications sometimes. And then I see all these requirements that can drive you crazy. So what really drives me is, at the beginning, it's the contact, it's the people. Because co-production, dear fellows, it is really about, do I meet the right guy or the right lady, which I want to spend 2 or 3 years with. And then if this is really given, then it is about story. And then it is about, you know, finding, let's say, solutions. And these solutions, I mean, in these 2 Indian cases, because I want to talk to Indian colleagues, is that there is no funder. Because, I mean, it's not possible. I mean, an Indian film shot in Assam or I don't know where. I mean, it is so complicated to meet the requirements of institutional, European or whatever funds. But I saw a solution. And let's say in these 2 examples, I could organize, let's say, equity money or own investments and partners that help with post-production. So we organize post-production, and that's the beauty of it, because let's say you can do your physical shoot in Thailand, because I did this Thai film with Apichatpong Veerasekaratul some years ago, where he completely shot in the Thai jungle. Impossible to shoot it in Germany, by the way. And we did the post-production effects in Frankfurt, and it worked wonderfully. So this is what I mean. I'm a romantic guy. I want to find solutions, and then talking finance plan. Okay. I mean, finance plan in the world of, let's say, the Creative Europe schema, where you have 35 elements and all kind of institutions and broadcasters and all these elements. Of course, you can talk about that, but I mean, in reality, first of all, you have to have a plan to navigate all these possibilities. Either it is totally independent, or you go very big, like, I mean, our Mel Gibson film, which was co-financing, not co-production. It is navigating. And it is really more than just meeting the requirements of funds. It is much more. Find solutions and fight for the vision, and know why you want to work together. Sorry, I become passionate. Sorry.
Thank you, Christoph. Well, I'm now going to turn to Neil. Your 7 million UK Global Screen Fund, you spoke about saying that this is an incredible win for the sector, if I remember one of your interviews. And you also said that the UK government was hugely pressed by COVID recovery demands. And in the light of this statement, I'd like you to elaborate on what the fund will do for those producers who wish to collaborate with international producers. And of course, from an Indian context, that would be very, very interesting. One more point I want to make is that, you know, the UK-based production company you're supporting, you've said in a statement again that this fund will actually support UK-based production companies, since most of these productions, you know, and push them to look outside, even in places where the film may not be completely or even totally in English. Neil.
Well, first of all, apologies for joining late. We have builders in at the moment, and I lost all electricity and internet. So huge apologies, which is also why I am currently in my daughter's bedroom. So first of all, apologies to everybody. So I think we were incredibly fortunate to be able to persuade the Treasury and government to give us 7 million for a pilot year. It was finally confirmed in November in 2020. And it was the very, very tight spending round and budget round because of the COVID support and interventions that the government were having to put in place at that time. So to get this support shows that the government sees that there is value in our sector, which is very encouraging. And this has also come about because we have withdrawn from Creative Europe, which had previously been an incredibly important way of producers within who are participants in Creative Europe to find collaborations and networks. We won't be able to scale Creative Europe because of its size. So what we've done is taken an opportunity to look at how can we put in place precise funding schemes which will help UK producers think about partnerships and international collaborations at an earlier stage, and actually start thinking about their business not just as a production company based in the UK making films for the UK audience, but to start thinking a bit more globally. And so there are 3 funding strands that we have. One which is to fund international strategies for companies that have been established for 3 or 4 years, that have shown a track record, and those companies can be in film or animation. We recognize that TV is having to be considered by producers if they want to have a mix of income to allow them to be sustainable. Games development is another area that we're looking at, and we're asking producers and the owners of those companies, what support do you need to become more internationally ambitious? Is it about developing a slate of stories where you're already in partnership with another co-producer? Is it about marketing yourselves more internationally with the product or the films that you've already made? So there's one which is just about business support. There's another which is around the actual distribution of individual film titles. So how can we help sales agents ensure that British films remain competitive now that we're no longer part of Creative Europe, by allowing them to be able to pay for subtitled versions of films or dubbed versions of films, or even to start to think about marketing campaigns in different ways in different territories. And then the one which is just been launched a couple of weeks ago is the Minority Co-Production Fund. So I think it's the first time we've had a very specific ring-fenced co-production support since Simon's fantastic British Screen days, where we are putting aside money for producers to explore collaborations where they're the minority producer on feature films, which, like you say, means that the film doesn't have to be in English, the director doesn't have to be British, it has to certify as British, but there are certain ways that you can do that which doesn't require the language requirement or the lead kind of creative to be from the UK. And obviously when you have co-production treaties in place, for instance with India, then that allows those two countries to start exploring how can we use this funding to have an established relationship, which then creates a partnership that then grows over time. So that allows producers to access £300,000, up to £300,000 as a grant, and then gives the producer the agency to understand how they can build, like I say, networks, collaborations, and new income streams through exploring territories which they may not have been able to consider because this type of funding hadn't previously been available. So yeah, I think it's an exciting fund to be able to set up. A head of the fund will start on Monday. Her name is Denitsa, so she'll be taking over the fund, and she can blame me if it goes wrong. And you can take all the success if you know it is sustained over time. This is a one-year pilot, and we are asking Treasury for it to be extended. But it is an opportunity to start thinking, how can we explore relationships with India? Can we send a delegation to Film Bazaar? And we've had a co-production treaty in place, and we've got a history of Indian filmmakers coming to London to make films. So you know, Sat Shri Akal England, you know, the Punjabi comedy, or
right.
The Diwali Dahani Jainji DDLJ, that was shot in King's Cross. You know, there's a history of exchange between the two countries, which hopefully we can build on.
Right. So I'm going to stick to you, Neil, because you've also said that the BFI was considering to set up something like the Unifrance, which is to promote talent, promote business internationally, UK content. I asked this specifically because we've had a very unique request at the FFO from a production house in Hyderabad, who are making a large-scale feature film, north of £2 million, with a very talented British director who is BAFTA nominated, a British crew, a completely British crew, and a British Asian cast with some Indian cast, and to be shot completely in India. But the positioning is that it's a complete British film. Would the BFI, in line with your thinking of promoting talent in business, would you be supportive of enabling this production house to look at co-producers? Would you do that kind of an initiative? This could come out of any other country too, this kind of a request.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the great thing about this fund is we've built in flexibility so that if we can see an opportunity, then we've got the ability to take it. So, and if we can have a session where we can go into more detail around the Global Screen Fund, because I don't want to take too much time away from this panel, I'm very happy to set that up, because now we're all on Zoom, although, you know, internet permitting. We can talk to producers about how they can work with UK producers. So for instance, yesterday via the DIT in Latin America, we spoke to 70 producers from Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Dominican Republic, and Panama. So we're trying to then speak to those producers and say, if you have a project which you believe you would want to work with a UK producer on, we're then matchmaking those projects.
Right, thank you. Simon, I want to come into you and then I'll go into a Q&A. There are some questions that I've got. I think Pan and Chris would want to take that. But before that, Simon, I want to come in and draw on your experience of you having headed British Screen, which is UK's national film agency. You worked with, even in Sweden, you worked with the largest regional fund in Scandinavia. You know, when it's collaboration and co-creation, producers looking beyond borders, how are institutional funders able to recognize and appreciate this aspect that of the producer wanting to look beyond borders? Do they look at it creatively, or do they look at it from a business point of view? Do they look at it in terms of return, the commercial intent? What are the parameters? If you could explain to us from an Indian perspective, how would an Indian producer leverage this with an European producer, and what would be the asks?
Well, yeah, it's a good question in a way. I wonder how to answer it. I mean, what I was saying earlier about the way in which co-production has changed is quite relevant to this, because, you know, in the days that we were talking about when I was doing a film with Pan, for example, and doing several films with India, at British Screen, we were able to say, well, you know, there's very interesting work and there's very interesting material and interesting filmmakers coming from India. They've got great ideas. They don't have an absolute specific relevance to Britain or the British market, although there is, as it happens, a large Indian community, of course, in the UK. But that was not really the point. The point was it was a foreign film, or would it be a foreign film? And how could we, as an organization, cultural organization in the UK, how could we justify my impulse to want to support a film? I mean, I was head of the organization, so, you know, I guess it was my impulse, my taste initially made me think Rajat Kosa looks like a very, very interesting filmmaker, or Asif Kapadia, and, you know, it would be great, I think, for us as an institution to be involved with this work, because it's going to be good work. And it's also culturally got a dimension that is interesting, and which I think could interest a British public. Then, you know, that's how we start as an institution. We decide this is work that we would like to be involved in. Then there are rules about how the money, on what basis the money can be provided. And this is where we come to what Christoph was talking about, which is that, you know, the producer and the filmmakers, they want to get this done, and they want to find a way to raise money in different countries for a film that may very well be very specifically culturally focused, and it has a particular character to it. And how do you get around the bureaucratic rules and the motivations and the restrictions that are surrounding the money you want to get your hands on? And you do it through co-production if you can ensure that the film can have officially and bureaucratically the nationality of more than one country. That nationality unlocks public funding. It unlocks possibly, you know, also money from the market, because distributors know that if a film has a certain nationality, they will get funding also at the distribution stage. So, you know, it helps to coerce and to motivate the private sector. But the trick is to get around, to find a way of getting around the rules. And that's the producer's job. And a good funder, I believe, a funder that wants to be in the business of supporting international films, using these structures and these treaties and getting around these restrictions, you know, has the same impulse, the same determination to find a way and to enable the producers to do it. And certainly you mentioned the fact that I was working at Filmivest in Sweden, where every film that we did was a co-producing activity of one kind or another. And you know, we were looking at films all the time in this way, to say, well, this is a film that's coming from Romania, or it's coming from Iran, or it's coming from Australia. I think it's really good. I think, yes, it could interest the Swedish public, but mainly it's a film that could be high profile, could be well received in the major festivals, could just be a film of very high quality. And our fund, and what we're existing to do in Sweden, is to be visibly behind this kind of good work, wherever it comes from. So, you know, we would help the producer to try to find a way of structuring it so that it can comply with our rules, but also comply with the rules of other organizations. I just mention one thing here, which I found in my career doing this, if you like, very useful, which I think is still appropriate, even with the rather, you know, strict and sometimes difficult territorial rules that we're having to live with now. There's this famous word reciprocity. And what funds in a number of places around Europe are now doing, have been doing since we started doing it in the 90s, but you know, it still carries on, that funds look to each other to fund films on a reciprocal basis. So to give an example of how this might work, you know, if I were running a fund in Europe at this moment, in say the Netherlands, and actually the Netherlands is quite a good example because the Netherlands does this, and if they decided that, you know, work coming from India could be interesting to be involved with as a minority co-producer of an Indian film, then a way to proceed could well be to say, well, yes, we're very interested in this Indian film that's come to us. We could put a little bit of money into it. Some work could be done in the Netherlands, and then Dutch people could be involved in the making of the film here or there or wherever. But what we'd also like to do is to talk about a Dutch film, which you, the NFDC, might want to help us to get made. And you, India, could be the minority co-producer of a Dutch film. And so we would proceed in this way, scratching each other's backs, if you like. And in my career, on a number of occasions, I've established with funds that I've been running reciprocal relationships, which then would go on creating, I mean, to give you an example, when I was running the film fund in Ireland, we had an ongoing and several times used reciprocal arrangement with Finland. The countries are around a similar size, not the case with India, obviously, but you know, a similar taste for alcohol too, which seemed to go well with the relationship between the producers. A similar taste for comedy. There were films that we found purely Finnish films that we would put money in from the Irish Fund, and the Finns would put money in from Finland, from the Finnish Film Foundation, into Irish films. Neither film would look like anything to do with the other country. The Finnish films were Finnish comedies. They had nothing Irish about them. But we were working on the basis that we would spread our money and spread our support and our involvement across these two countries. Those kind of relationships, I think, can be very useful in keeping flexibility and a kind of profitable way of working, both culturally and also financially.
Great. I'm going to take that strand of thought to Dhanpreet ji. Ma'am, NFDC has supported a lot of co-productions through Film Bazaar and on its own. I think it would be great if you could give us an overview of the various initiatives that NFDC has taken over the years on the co-production front.
Yeah, sure, Vikram. I was just hearing to Simon. So that makes me actually think that the kind of incentives, the kind of, the criteria we are trying to put in for giving incentives for official co-productions. So he's not very happy with the territorial clause in that. You know? So how to actually go about it? Because very rightly said Simon, the way you've tried to explain it, that it should not be like physically to be there for shooting or to be there for actually be there for post-production. But the idea is that yes, it's a kind of that creative unison of two producers who decide to take on a project which may interest one country and may not interest another one, but still going together because both of them agree with that content. And so that actually makes me think that when we are at the verge, when we are looking at the criteria for our official co-productions, giving incentives to our official co-productions, so we must also, as a ministry, look into few of such exceptions as well. You know, instead of clearly delineating that this is the presence is required or this thing is required. There should be something where we'll have to give a space for not being physically present there. So
Right.
that sets a thought in that. I would also like to tell to all the esteemed panelists that FFO, Film Facilitation Office of NFDC and Ministry of Information Broadcasting, at presently headed by Vikramji, they'll be the one who will be processing the applications for the co-production status. See, we at NFDC, we at Ministry, we are also very keen for co-productions, so that the stories go outside. Nalin has been working hard. I mean, the places which he's mentioning, the places which Christopher is mentioning of Assam, and Nalin is talking of Kathiawar. I think, Nalin, those stories need to go to everywhere in India first also. It's great of you that, and great of this fraternity, that it is accepted and taken full hands-on abroad. I feel this is the beauty of co-productions. This is the real attraction of co-productions, and this thing somehow should not be bogged down with so many rules, so many procedures, and so many other things, checklists, you know, the way Simon is mentioning, the way Christopher told that he'll be the one who will take the risk and go on. We need more people like him as well. But as an executive producer with NFDC, I think that's a great point that you've made, and that has made me think that we need to keep some leeway for some exceptions as well with us. Instead, or else we'll be bogged down with the things we set up ourselves for something beautiful to come out, and maybe we might not get that end result which we are aiming at through the co-productions.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And I now go into a question which is from Shantanu. It says, I'm a French producer and a screenwriter with Indian origin, very interested in co-producing several episodes of my Cosmopolitan series in India. Which institutions can help us? My anti-heroine is discovering the origins in India, and so I want to integrate and respect the habits and customs, the rhythm, the music, the states, and then how establishing sustainable co-production between France and India. Shantanu, I would request you to go to the Film Bazaar website, www.filmbazarindia.com, and have a look at the co-production market. Do apply there, and you must make it a point to visit India in November when the Film Bazaar happens. It happens alongside the International Film Festival of India. It will get you to meet a lot of producers, a lot of financiers who probably align with your vision. There's another question that says, I am a new Indian filmmaker building a remote co-production platform with my mentors at Cambridge University. What are the most urgent problems that need to be solved in enabling co-production in India and Europe? Pan, you want to take that? What are the most urgent problems that need to be solved in enabling co-production in India and Europe from a practical basis?
Yeah, I would just speak from, let's say, filmmaker's point of view. You
Right.
know, I mean, I never wanted to be producer, but I'm obliged to become my own producer with each project in the independent filmmaker setup. And since 20 years, every movie I've done has always been co-production. So, for example, when we did Samsara, was Germany, France, Italy, India co-production, Valley of Flower, Japan, France, you know, and you know the rest of the movie. And the last one is no different. And it's because I was compelled to sort of go out, you know, and raise this fund. But coming back to the question, if you can repeat it once again, please.
There's this Indian filmmaker who wants to build a remote co-production platform. And so he wants to know what are the urgent problems.
I think the urgent problems are that I can tell you that I've worked, one of my film was with Swiss, German, French, and NFDC and New Zealand, Beyond the Known World. So what happens is, one is the cultural problem. One, it's very, very tough very often to do certain Indian story, you know, because there's only one type of story are appealing to the rest of the world, or what we call it as a universal appeal. One. Second, the co-productions come with several obligations. Like when I did Beyond the Known World, we were supposed to have a French co-production. So I was obliged to take a French actor. I must choose one French actor, and once we chose the actor, the co-production fell apart, but we still had to continue with the actor. So I think what happens is that very often with country like India, who's doing co-production with so many other countries, it will be great to define what each country is looking for with Indian filmmaker, and I mean, the film we did with Simon ages ago with NFDC, I don't remember how many countries we had. I was a line producer, very young, didn't even know, suddenly I think, Simon, if I'm correct, we had Dutch production, German, British, French, NFDC, and we were shooting in New Delhi, film of Rajan Khosa, so yeah,
five companies.
So now I think that would be the urgency, I would say, to really know that if at all you are navigating your film to New Zealand. For example, I took my last film show to New Zealand, and then in the Cannes market, 1 hour later, I have a meeting with CNC of France and Cinéma du Monde, and an hour later, I have to talk with, another front from Germany. And I have to be, as a filmmaker, totally be aware. If not, I can ruin my own chances. That it will never be the same. In Samsara, I had 14 nationalities. We didn't know that. Carl Baumgartner, who was our producer, when we finalized the team, when people started applying for visa, through the INB ministry to come to Ladakh, we realized somehow unknowingly we have 40 nationalities to deal with. That's because of Italian, France, German co-production. And when they came, they were coming for 4.5 months. So the Polish team really wanted Polish food. The French were missing their cheese and wine. It was too long in Ladakh. And, and this is morally, as a filmmaker, it's so important that I provide them, and it made them happy. And the result was on the screen. So I would say that it would be great to have such a platform where we really understand what Simon is trying to do, or what Neil is doing in UK, or, from Christoph from Germany, what funds are available. Because one day I was told, now you go and mix in Dortmund, and I said, I'm vegetarian. There is no vegetarian food in Dortmund, but I had to do it. I stayed there 6 weeks mixing the film. Then say, now you go and mix your music in Bulgaria. This is an Indian movie. And I'm suddenly sitting in Sofia with 90 musicians. So I feel this happens to every film, every Indian film. If it happens to European film, they are more or less prepared because cultural nuances and similarities are there. So it's easy to work for an Italian with a French, or sometime I had creative issues. Like, for example, I screened my Valley of Flowers cut with the German fund and German producer. And they said, oh, these love scenes are too long. You should cut it really short.
Right.
Next thing, I bring the same film. We have a screening with the French people, French and Italian co-producers. They say love scenes are so great, we should add one more. Now, what do I do? So I said, can you talk with each other? No, we will not talk. Let somebody else talk. So we did spend, 4 months trying to figure out who, as a director, I should listen to in a co-production. So I feel there are some very real challenges when it comes to, movies.
Right.
So I guess the platform would be that, if we really know what each country would mean from India's point of view to co-produce with New Zealand. New Zealand has really huge interest in India. The Beyond the Non-World, they put 80% of fund, and they were still very keen. They told me, we will still do it. Their only condition is they want to do English language film, New Zealand team, New Zealand actors. We can have Indian actors, but they are ready to film entire movie in India. So that's so that's totally different model than working with France, which I'm doing right now on last film show. Yeah.
Can I say one last sentence? I mean, because time is over.
I know.
I mean, one sentence. Co-production, I would say monitor your experience. I mean, talking to the young Indian people. Monitor your experience, which means what do you want from co-producers and what are you willing to give? What are your expectations? That is so crucial. And then maybe it gets a bit easier.
Right.
Hopefully.
I think we can take one last question, and that I think is for Neil, my God, I'm flooded with questions. Neil,
Yannick, gehst du mal?
so Neil, this is from Nilakshi Sengupta. She says, what percentage of UK involvement do we need to have in the story production for BFI funding?
Well, if it's a official UK-Indian co-production treaty, then there'd have to be a kind of minimum amount that the UK would need to contribute to budget. In terms of qualifying as a British certified film, there'd have to be certain crew members who would need to be involved. But in terms of actual UK content, was it about kind of cultural content within the film rather than kind of financial and crew? With the Minority Co-Production Fund, it kind of echoes what Simon was saying, which is it's about reciprocity. So the film that the UK producer might be involved in with an Indian co-producer could be shot in India in Indian language, and then the next time we would hope that the reciprocal relationship would then mean that the Indian co-producer would be involved in a majority UK production. So it is that reciprocal relationship which we're trying to encourage. So if we had a Indian film in an Indian language with an Indian director, that could still qualify for the UK Minority Co-Production Fund.
Thank you. And I'm unfortunately, I have to end it. All good things come to an end. And to my most, distinguished and eminent panelists, thank you so much for making time out to be here and for your wonderful insights. And I'm sure the viewers would have realized that co-creation, collaboration, not only has a cultural impact, business impact, but of course, it is a very important integral part in the filming value chain. With this thought, I'm sure there'll be many more questions. Please reach out to us. And if you want to reach out to the individual panelists, we'll also help you with that. Thank you so much again for tuning in to this session at the India Virtual Pavilion in Cannes 2021, organized by the Ministry of Information Broadcasting in FICCI. Thank you again, and wish you all a very, very happy Cannes and a great Cannes outing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.